What's the most horrifying thing where you live? Story 1. The most horrifying thing I've dealt with around here wasn't a bear, a snake, or some movie monster nonsense. It was an opossum. One of the little psychopaths somehow moved into the walls of my mobile home and started paying rent exclusively in noise and property damage. Every night I'd hear scratching, thumping, and random crashing sounds. Sounded like somebody was renovating the place with a spoon. Naturally, I called the landlord. The landlord's response was basically, "Wow, that's crazy. Good luck with that. Outstanding. Glad we're all contributing." So eventually, I crawled underneath the trailer to handle it myself. I'm laying flat on my back in dirt, insulation hanging everywhere, questioning every decision that led me to this moment when I suddenly hear something sprinting toward me, fast. I shine my flashlight up into the insulation, and there it is, an angry, snarling opossum about a foot from my face. A foot. I don't care what wildlife experts say. At that distance, every animal becomes a dragon. Meanwhile, my girlfriend is standing safely inside the kitchen laughing so hard she can barely breathe, yelling, "Don't shoot him." Oh, thanks. Great advice from Mission Control. There I am fighting for my life in the crawl space while she's treating the whole thing like premium entertainment. The opossum eventually got evicted, but the real lesson stuck with me. Landlords will ignore problems so aggressively they'll accidentally turn tenants into wildlife control specialists. And somehow, they're still expecting rent on the first. Story 2. The most horrifying thing in my town isn't a wild animal, a storm, or some local urban legend. It's a legless homeless guy who will literally get out of his wheelchair and chase people. And before anyone thinks I'm exaggerating, I wish I was. The first time I saw it happen, my brain completely blue-screened. 1 second, he's sitting in a wheelchair. The next, he's launching himself forward on his arms like a horror movie creature that escaped containment. My friends and I learned this the hard way. We were walking through town when he suddenly started coming after us. We turned around, saw him moving at a speed that should not be physically possible, and immediately decided this was no longer our area of expertise. So we ran up a flight of stairs. Problem solved, right? Wrong. This man started chasing us up the stairs, on his hands, fast, like alarmingly fast. The kind of fast that makes you stop asking questions and start negotiating with whatever higher power happens to be available. The worst part wasn't even the chase. It was realizing halfway up the stairs that he was actually gaining ground. To this day, whenever someone says, "You don't have to outrun the monster, just the people you're with," I remember that afternoon and think, buddy, if that guy decides he's motivated, none of us are making it. I've encountered a lot of strange things in life. Very few of them have managed to completely rewrite my understanding of human mobility. That guy did it in about 30 seconds. Story 3. Back when I was in the army, getting a day off was basically impossible. Didn't matter if you were sick. Pneumonia? Show up. Fresh out of dental surgery? Congratulations, you're still going to work. I swear the only acceptable excuse was being actively launched into space. Then, one winter morning in Fairbanks, I opened my door and immediately found a mama moose and her calf parked right behind my truck. Not nearby, not across the yard, right there. Apparently, she decided my driveway was the perfect place to build a little moose nest, or whatever the official wildlife term is. So now I'm standing on my porch making direct eye contact with an animal that weighs more than my vehicle. I snapped a picture and sent it to my squad leader. His response came back almost instantly. "Get back in your house." That's it. No questions. No, "Can you find another route?" No motivational army speech. Just immediate surrender. And that was the only time I ever got a full day off. Turns out pneumonia couldn't stop the army, but an angry moose mom absolutely could. Honestly, that might be the strongest military force I've ever personally encountered. Story 4. Wild hogs. No, seriously. People always expect me to say spiders, snakes, some haunted backwoods nonsense. But nah, the actual nightmare fuel around here is wild hogs. One day my neighbor got chased by a whole pack of those angry little tanks and had to scramble up a tree like his life depended on it. Because it literally did. And here's the part that messed me up. They didn't leave. They just stood down there, waiting. For 2 freaking hours. 2 hours. Like they were running some low-budget mob operation. "Yeah, Tony, we'll wait him out." Meanwhile, this poor dude is stuck in a tree sweating through his shirt, while a bunch of hogs stare at him like unpaid debt collectors. And people think pigs are cute because of cartoons. That's adorable. These things look like they pay taxes, own firearms, and hold grudges. Ever since then, Every weird noise outside at night has me peeking through the blinds thinking, please be a burglar. Please don't be hogs. That's where my standards are now. Story 5. Probably the tarantula hawk wasp. And if you've never seen one before, congratulations on living a blessed life. I woke up one morning, rolled over, and there it was, in my bed, just hanging out, like it had paid rent. For a solid second, my brain refused to process what I was looking at. It was too early, I wasn't wearing my glasses, and I was desperately hoping it was a weird sock or a piece of clothing. Nope, giant wasp, actual nightmare insect. Now here's the fun thing about tarantula hawk wasps. They're famous for having one of the most painful stings on Earth. The kind of bug that makes scientists describe the pain using words that sound like rejected heavy metal album titles. So there I am, frozen in bed, trying to calculate how to escape my own mattress without accidentally angering the airborne pain missile 6 inches away. And that's when I realized something. The wasp was probably just as confused as I was. Imagine waking up and finding a giant human sleeping next to you. Honestly, fair. Still, didn't make me feel any better. Eventually, it left without stinging me, but the psychological damage remains. To this day, every time I feel a random tickle on my arm while I'm sleeping, I wake up like a Navy SEAL responding to an active threat. People talk about sharing a bed with spiders. That's rookie stuff. Story 6. The most horrifying thing where I live? Crackheads looking through my window. And before anyone says, just close the blinds, let me add one very important detail. I live on the 9th floor. That's the part that keeps breaking my brain. One night, I noticed movement outside my window and figured it was probably a reflection or maybe sleep deprivation. You know, the usual lies we tell ourselves before reality gets involved. Then I looked again. There was a guy peering through the gap in my shades, outside, 9 floors up. To this day, I still don't know if he was on a fire escape, climbing something he absolutely shouldn't have been climbing, or if gravity had simply decided to take the evening off. My first thought wasn't even fear. It was confusion. Like, sir, how did you get here? Because if I have to use an elevator and a key fob to reach my apartment and you're hanging outside my window, then clearly you're putting way more effort into this visit than I am. The worst part is that after something like that happens, every little noise becomes suspicious. A tap on the glass, a shadow in your peripheral vision, a random creak outside. Suddenly, I'm conducting security assessments like I'm guarding state secrets instead of reheating leftovers at midnight. People always say living high up makes you feel safer. Usually they're right. Usually the danger isn't supposed to arrive from the direction reserved for birds. Story 7. The most horrifying thing where I live isn't a natural disaster or some dangerous animal. It's how unbelievably unhinged some people can be over the smallest inconvenience. A guy around here got shot at a grocery store because he suggested someone return their shopping cart. That's it. Not a fight. Not some long-running feud. Not a dramatic confrontation. A shopping cart. Imagine waking up that morning thinking your biggest problem is picking up groceries and then finding yourself in a life-threatening situation because you committed the unforgivable crime of saying, hey, maybe put your cart back. That's the part that messes with me. There used to be this unspoken assumption that most minor disagreements would end with somebody rolling their eyes and walking away. Now, you never know. Someone cuts in line, parks like an idiot, leaves a cart in the middle of the lot, and suddenly your brain has to calculate whether basic human interaction is worth the risk. And don't get me wrong, I'm still judging people who abandon carts. I'm just judging them silently now. The shopping cart is honestly one of the simplest tests of whether a person can function in society. Nobody forces you to return it. There's no reward, no punishment, just a tiny act of consideration. Apparently that's asking way too much from certain people. So now every time I see a cart sitting sideways across 3 parking spaces, I don't think, what a lazy jerk. I think, well, that's definitely not a conversation I'm starting. Because somewhere along the way, common courtesy became a high-risk activity. Story 8. Tornadoes. People who haven't seen one up close tend to think of them as a weather event, a little spinning funnel on the news. Maybe something dramatic for a documentary? Nah. A tornado is basically nature waking up one morning and deciding a specific zip code no longer sparks joy. Years ago, a town not too far from me got nearly wiped off the map. I went through the area afterward, and that's when it really hits you. Pictures don't do it justice. Entire neighborhoods looked like somebody had grabbed them with a giant hand and shaken them apart. Houses were just gone. Not damaged. Gone. Trees stripped bare, cars tossed into places cars should never be, random family photos scattered across fields miles away. And the weirdest part? One house would be flattened into splinters, while the house next door was standing there like absolutely nothing happened. Nature's RNG system is completely broken. People always talk about the sound too. They compare it to a freight train. Personally, I think that's unfair to freight trains. A freight train, at least, has the decency to stay on tracks and announce where it's going. A tornado just shows up uninvited, redecorates the entire town, and leaves everyone else to figure out where their roof ended up. Nothing humbles you faster than realizing the thing you're afraid of isn't a monster. It's wind, just really angry wind. Story 9. I live in a nice little suburban area surrounded by thick woods, the kind of place where people complain about deer eating their flowers and think that's the biggest threat around. Meanwhile, every once in a while, I'll wander into the forest at 1 or 2 in the morning, carrying an Aztec death whistle. If you've never heard one before, imagine a human scream being processed through pure nightmare fuel. So there I am, standing in the darkness like an absolute lunatic, blowing this thing into the trees for no reason other than finding it hilarious. And every single time, about 5 seconds later, I remember something important. There are other people out here. Some poor guy is probably walking his dog, hears a blood-curdling shriek echo through the woods, and immediately starts rewriting his will. Some teenager sneaking home late is suddenly convinced they've discovered a cryptid. Some homeowner wakes up, hears the noise through an open window, and spends the next 3 hours Googling, "Can demons migrate seasonally?" Honestly, the funniest part is that everybody in the area is probably worried about bears, coyotes, or mountain lions. Meanwhile, the actual disturbance in the woods is just me, a grown adult standing in the darkness making sounds that would get a medieval village priest involved. If local Reddit ever starts a thread about a mysterious screaming creature in the forest, I'm keeping my mouth shut. Sometimes it's important to support local folklore. Story 10. The most horrifying thing around here isn't a monster, a serial killer, or some cursed abandoned building. It's a river. Apparently, over 100 years ago, Chicago slaughterhouses dumped so much animal waste into the river that parts of it are allegedly still bubbling today because there's basically a giant layer of rotting meat buried down there. Yeah, take a second with that one. The river is literally out here breathing. Nope, absolutely not. The first time I heard that, I laughed because it sounded fake. Then I made the mistake of imagining generations of decomposing slaughterhouse leftovers marinating at the bottom like some forbidden historical soup nobody ordered. And before anyone says, well, that's just methane gas. Cool, thanks. That somehow makes me feel exactly 0% better. Then somebody told me not to look up what happened to all the animal fat that floated to the surface back then, which naturally meant I immediately wanted to know. Big mistake. Human curiosity is a scam. Every horrible fact I've ever learned started with me saying, how bad could it be? And ended with me wishing I could factory reset my brain. Now, whenever I walk near the river, I don't see water anymore. I see a century-old crime scene that's still actively participating in the conversation. Story 11. The most horrifying thing around here isn't some urban legend. It's the fact that people are messing with strangers' drinks downtown. A while back, a woman in her 20s went out for what was supposed to be a normal night. You know, grab a drink, hang out, have fun. The kind of thing millions of people do without thinking twice. Instead, she ended up getting drugged. From what everyone was talking about afterward, EMTs had to rush in and administer Narcan. The whole situation spiraled so fast, it's honestly terrifying. One minute you're out enjoying your night, the next you're in a life-threatening emergency because some absolute dirtbag thought it'd be funny or profitable to poison a stranger's evening. That's the part that sticks with me. You can avoid bad neighborhoods. You can lock your doors. You can stay alert. But how are you supposed to prepare for somebody slipping something into a drink while you're just trying to exist? Now, every time someone says, just go out and have fun, I think, yeah, cool. Let me also keep a constant eye on my glass like it's the nuclear launch codes. Nothing says relaxing night out quite like treating every beverage like a potential crime scene.